Welcome back to the Reading Room. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, author of The Journal, Legends and Tales, Creepy and Fun Stories to Tell Around the Campfire, and GPS Signal Lost, Attempting to Reestablish Connection, which is coming out on April 26th. I'm not quite sure when this video comes out. I record these videos in batch. I know you're not supposed to tell that kind of stuff on YouTube, but, you know, we're here to hang out and relax. This is kind of a chill environment, so I'm going to be straight with you guys. Today we're going to be continuing reading The Journal. Last week we finished off chapter 7, and we found out a whole bunch of new stuff regarding Heath and this Alex Young character and what's going on, and we're kind of starting to really dig into the mystery of what happened to Persephone. If this is your first time here, you can go back and you can watch the entire playlist. We'll have the entire series up. We'll start with chapter 1. You can just listen through it and all that kind of stuff. So if that's something you want to do, if you want to read along, you can always pick up this or any of my books over on Amazon as ebooks or paperbacks. You can pick them up on my website as a signed paperback copy. So that's another great way to help support the channel. And then you can also pick up ebooks pretty much anywhere where you can buy ebooks. So that's all available, and that way you can read along if you want to. Otherwise, you can just kind of sit back and relax as we go through the story. And I'll be sharing not only the chapters, but also stuff around the chapters and some different things, talking about the reason that I wrote certain things and that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So this week we are starting with chapter 8, and chapter 8 is a Josh chapter, and it's kind of getting back into him after he's read the second journal entry that showed up. And we'll kind of find out what happens next for Josh. So let's go ahead and get into it. Chapter 8 is called Anonymous. A thick mist hugged the parking lot as Josh strolled between the cars. He had been in this place many times, and it was starting to feel like a second home. But he knew that feeling wouldn't last. Sometimes he was pushing a cart. Sometimes he was walking with his family. But every time the peace would be interrupted by a scream. It was the only thing that was truly predictable in these dreams. He would hear the scream and run to help, finding a young pregnant woman holding a child and being held at gunpoint. As soon as he arrived, the man wielding the gun would turn to face him and fire a single shot. Then the dream would end, and Josh would find himself lying in bed once more, usually with sunlight streaming through the blinds and onto his face. The routine had seemed like a living hell at first, but now it was almost a calming experience. Why fight what he knew was a losing battle? As he looked around at the variety of cars, he was impressed with what his mind could do. Everything from high-end sports cars to minivans and even motorcycles were scattered all around him. Several unsuccessful attempts to actually drive various vehicles had been made in these fantasy sessions. Not being able to drive the high-end cars sometimes made him feel like these dreams were a waste of time. Wandering past a light blue sedan, he noticed something strange out of the corner of his eye. Turning his head, he watched a shadow figure disappear behind one of the cars. This was something new. Moving swiftly in the direction of the figure, he was interrupted by the expected sound of the woman's scream. He knew that it wouldn't matter if he went to her or not, since she was only in his mind, but he felt an unnatural force leading him away from the shadow. Arriving at the scene of the attempted robbery, he watched the gunman turn, point the revolver at him, and pull the trigger, ending the dream and plunging him into a bright abyss. As expected, the sun was shining on his face as he awoke, and the sound of birds playing in the cool October weather made him smile. This time of year had always been his favorite, and he was looking forward to seeing the bright colors and feeling the cool air as he walked this evening. Sitting up, he remembered what he had seen the night before in the journal. He could explain away the first entry as something he overlooked when he found the book, but he was absolutely sure that the second entry was new. Research would need to be done for sure, but he first needed to get a shower and eat. Remembering what had happened with the mirror the day before, he was apprehensive of the shower at first. He kept the curtain open just slightly and peeked out every few seconds to make sure there was no one else around. Finishing up in the bathroom, with no strange happenings, he made his way to the kitchen and enjoyed some pancakes. So far, the day was starting off good, with the only odd occurrence being the shadow figure intruding on his dream. If that was the only weird thing today, he would be happy to say the least. Collapsing into his office chair after breakfast, he booted up the computer and pulled out the journal. He was half worried a new entry would be waiting for him, and was relieved to find only blank pages following entry 2. The name of the missing girl would hopefully be enough to get a hit in an old newspaper or police report, but he had some other ideas if that failed. There would be a massive challenge to overcome, though, as there was no last name for the girl in the entry. Heath couldn't have helped out just a little. He started by searching for the name Persephone in newspapers from the time, and then branched out to any police reports he could dig up online. When that didn't work, he started scanning through every page he could find in the archive, reading the headlines and stories one by one. This approach was usually his favorite, as it tended to yield new stories for him to cover on his vlog. But, at the moment, he just wanted to find out about this particular case. Starting with local papers in February of 1964, Josh spent the better part of the next several hours reading more than he thought he would need to. He skipped the obviously unrelated things, ads and the stories that didn't mention missing people, and only stopped for a short time when his stomach growled at him late in the afternoon. Finding nothing that stuck out between February and July, the first article that caught his attention was from August 16, 1964. Mount Vernon, Ohio. FBI agents raided a farm in northwest Knox County on Friday evening following an anonymous tip about a human trafficking ring being run by the owner. The farm belonged to Alex Young, a Mount Vernon native, and he was the only resident following the death of his mother, who owned the property until she passed away last year. Authorities have confirmed that they found 15 women being held in the barn, and dogs have been brought in to search for possible remains buried on the property. More information is expected to be available this week as police work to identify the women, and inform their families. Based on the date and location, Josh couldn't help but wonder if the anonymous tipster was Heath. This seemed like a bit of a stretch, but maybe he had found the missing girl on that guy's farm and called it into police. There had to be a report somewhere that listed the names. Searching through other papers, he was only able to find a couple of quick mentions about the farm owner being tried with kidnapping and a blurb in one of the articles about all of the girls making it home to their families. None of the girls were mentioned by name anywhere, and Josh was getting annoyed at the lack of details included overall. This case seemed like something that would have gripped local headlines for weeks or months, but the papers treated it like a simple purse snatching. A couple more hours of digging would prove helpful in getting the address for the farm, but any further information was lost to time. There wasn't a lot that could be done from here, especially as it was nearly midnight at this point, and his eyelids were beginning to revolt against being held open. Shutting off his computer, Josh went to the kitchen to grab a quick snack and drink before going to bed. Finding some Pop-Tarts and a can of pop, he was walking out of the kitchen when he noticed the basement was unlocked. Pausing, he thought back over the past couple of days and tried to remember if he had unlocked the door at any point following the power issue. He couldn't recall touching the latch, but he also knew it couldn't have unlocked itself. Locking the door once again, a quick search of the house was done to ensure that no one else was there, and he made his way to bed. Sleep would be difficult to find, but he knew that counting enough sheep would help him find his way back to the parking lot. Maybe he would get to see the shadow again, or maybe he would finally get to drive one of those exotic cars. As the sun came in through the window, Josh rubbed his eyes and stretched himself awake. The dream had been as normal as ever, with no shadow figure and no driving. He couldn't help but feel just a little disappointed in the lack of variety, but at least it was a reliable lack of variety. It could always be worse. He could have a different dream every night and never be able to tell the difference between a dream and reality. As he lay there, toying with the idea of going back to sleep and whether sleep during the day would make the dream any different, he was startled by the sound of his phone dinging with a new text message. he had been wondering if there was an issue with his service, as the only message he could remember getting in the past few days was the cryptic one from a couple of days ago. Picking the phone up from the bedside table, he half expected a message from his wife telling him that she would be home soon. Deep down, he knew that wasn't the case. What was in the hidden room? He spoke the words aloud, noticing the same unknown sender as before. If this was a joke being played on him by someone he knew, he had to respect their dedication. This message didn't really make sense, though. What room? Where? They could have provided something to go on, as if to acknowledge the question he was thinking. As if to acknowledge the questions he was thinking, another ding alerted him to a new message, answering one question and raising many more. Go to the farm. His stomach turned as he read the words, but he didn't know how much of it was due to excitement and how much was due to anxiety. He had solved plenty of mysteries, even going to locations to film or conduct research, but this was much different. Not only was someone sending him these cryptic text messages, but they were also physically in the house at times to write on his mirror, write in the journal, and turn out the lights. Calling the police wouldn't do much, partially because he would sound crazy if he said things were happening with no evidence, and partly because he knew his phone hadn't had service in recent memory. At first, he assumed that there was an issue with his cell provider, or maybe a tower nearby had been damaged, but now he was inclined to believe that someone had to be blocking his phone. He was receiving messages from the stranger, but nothing else was going in or out. Come to think of it, he hadn't even really tried to reach anyone else. He hadn't felt the desire to call anyone or send a message. On the contrary, he had actively avoided reaching out. Even now, he felt that interacting with anyone else would somehow damage his ability to solve the mystery before him. Those feelings were not normal, and he knew it. Climbing out of bed, he decided to get a shower and eat breakfast and then call his wife before leaving to see how she was doing. Even if he was going to avoid the other several billion people on the planet, she was the one he wanted to speak to. It had been over a week since she had gone to visit her mother, and he hadn't heard a thing from her in that time. He should be worried out of his mind, but that same feeling of not wanting to reach out was holding the worry hostage. After a shower and pancakes, he picked up his phone and tried to call her. The phone rang several times, and an automated voice came on to tell him that the number he had tried was no longer in service. He tried calling her again and got the same response. Going down the list of saved numbers, he was greeted with the same generic voice on every single one. There had to be a rational explanation that didn't involve every person he knew disconnecting their numbers, and the only thing he could think of was that whoever was responsible for the journal and power issues must also be able to reroute the calls that he was making. More important than the how, though, was the why. Whoever this person was, they were leading him down a rabbit hole, and the mystery was only growing more and more strange. Maybe solving what happened to Heath would help him out of his own situation. As he drove toward the farm, he went over the plan in his head. A quick search online indicated the farm was owned by a young family now, and he wasn't sure if they knew the history of the place. Showing up and telling them that the farm was once a prison for kidnapped young women might get the door slammed in his face. The best idea he could come up with was to tell them that he was there to inspect the well on the property and hope that they would let him wander around on his own. As bad as that idea was, it would turn out to be unnecessary. As he pulled up the gravel driveway, it was clear no one had used the road in a long time. Approaching the house, he could see boards in the windows, and part of the roof had fallen into the top floor. Parking his car, he got out and approached the front door. He wanted to at least knock and make sure there was no one inside before checking the rest of the property. The stairs leading up to the front porch looked like they were about to fall apart, and the porch didn't look much better. Though he was able to make it up the steps, the porch couldn't take his 210 pounds, and he fell through the boards to the ground below. Even though it was only a couple of feet, The pain he felt as he hit the ground made him think he had broken something. "Shit!" he yelled as he landed hard on the deck of the porch. His left foot twisted in the newly created hole, and his right foot flew up in the air. Carefully, he maneuvered himself into a sitting position, trying to keep his leg from moving more than it needed to. He was able to readjust his right leg on the stairs and use the surprisingly sturdy railing to pull himself up and free his foot from its cage. Hobbling back over to the car, he climbed back into the driver's seat and took a minute to evaluate his situation. The ankle wasn't broken, though it was probably sprained. There was a small tear in his pant leg and some blood that revealed that he had cut himself on something. The cut itself wasn't deep, but it was painful enough to the touch to cause him to wince when he tried to look closer. Maybe the mysterious stranger had led him out here to die, thinking the porch would do him in. No, he's probably looking at you, thinking, "Why did I pick this dumbass? Since no one with any sense would have tried to walk on that porch," he said to himself. Finding the medical kit he kept under the seat, he was able to clean up the cut and wrap some gauze around his leg to hopefully keep it from getting infected. There wasn't a lot he could do for the ankle except limit the weight he put on it, making the thought of walking anywhere seem insane. After spending a few minutes resting, he climbed back out of the car and started walking toward the side of the house. If nothing else, he could at least check around back to see what the situation was there. Rounding the corner of the house, he took in the view of the wide open field that made up the backyard. There was an old swing set that sat just to the left of the yard, and a path that wound its way around a small garden to the very back and through a fence that separated the main yard from the bigger field. Looking back across the property, his eyes followed the barely discernible path as it went through the overgrown yard. At the end of the path, Josh's gaze was greeted by the sight of an old, decrepit barn. So that's going to do it for Chapter 8. We're finding out more about Josh, and there's some weird stuff going on. And you might be asking yourself the question, like, why is the main character named Josh? What's going on here? And to be honest, when I first started writing this story, it was a completely different thing. And I was originally going to kind of do a play acting type of thing through some YouTube videos, and that was kind of where I was going with it. When I decided to make it into an actual novel and actually write it, I thought, it'd be kind of fun. I'll take it since it's my debut, I'll take it and use myself as the main character in a way, except it's not me directly, but it's kind of a facsimile of me in a way. He's got a YouTube channel, he does vlogs, that kind of stuff. He likes to uncover mysteries. So I kind of used myself as a template, but I made some major changes as well, obviously, and you'll find out more about those as we go along in the story and unravel more about what's going on and why there seems to be nobody else around, why he can't reach the outside world. You may already have some guesses. Maybe you can leave those in the comments below if you want to take a stab at what might be going on here. If you don't have a copy yet, like I said at the beginning, if you want to read along, you can pick up a copy on Amazon or my website. The website is the best place to get them, in my opinion, because you can get a signed copy, and what's cooler than a signed copy of a book, right? But otherwise, you can go over to Patreon if you want to jump on the Patreon. I've got all kinds of cool stuff over there. You get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, naming videos, all the normal Patreon stuff, plus a few other little benefits in there. So go check that out if that's something you're interested in. It's a way to help support the channel. But thank you all for watching. Next week, we're going to be reading Chapter 9. That's another Patreon thing. You can check that out right now. If Chapter 9 is not on YouTube, it will be available on Patreon. So there's another way if you want to keep up with the story a little bit ahead of time. So thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.